And we're live. Hi all, welcome to another episode. We are joined again by the secret influencer, Nick. How are you?
Yes, great. Good to be back. Excited about the topic. So, yes, fantastic.
Absolutely. And obviously we've got everyone tuning in on TikTok as well. So anyone that wants to pop up in the box to talk about the topic we're going to be discussing tonight, that'd be fantastic. It's a radio show, as Nick's put it. I really don't know why. But tonight we're joined by the sleep coach. And we're joined by Tracy. Hi.
Hi, and hello, TikTok and YouTube.
Absolutely. And thank you for coming up early in the morning. You're down under, aren't you, in Australia?
Me?
Yeah, because you said it was about 5, 6 a.m. your time.
No, that's usually when I like to get up. It's 7 p.m. This is my wild Friday night.
See, I just can't keep up.
Too many people.
When you was putting a message to me, it's going to be my 5 a.m., I'm like, is she in Australia?
No, I think might have been a typo. But I also might have just been talking about the fact that I get up really, really early. And so it's sometimes challenging to do things later in the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously we're going to play our video. Please share this, everybody. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please follow us, and we will see you in about 30 seconds. And welcome back. So tonight we are going to be discussing about sleep anxiety. So this could be absolutely anything. And because you're the sleep coach, Tracy, I thought we'd kickstart with you, pick on you a little bit.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's okay. Obviously, I'm gonna pick on Nick at some point, and he's probably gonna pick on me. I don't know.
I'm excited to hear what Tracy's got to say. Really excited.
Absolutely. So, give us a little bit of an insight in who you are, where you're from, and how you came by to be a sleep coach.
Sure. Well, I'm Tracy Hannigan, known as Tracy the Sleep Coach, pretty much everywhere. I've always had both a personal and professional interest in sleep. Back in the day, I worked in community mental health in Northern California, obviously in settings where sleep issues were pretty prominent, and lots of the bidirectional relationship between sleep issues and mental health issues really overlapped. Fast forward lots of years and my own first bout of insomnia. I moved to the UK. I trained as an osteopath and worked in pain settings. Again, lots and lots of overlap. And during this time, I had gone through a second bout of insomnia as well. So I have both the personal and professional interest in sleep. Sort of academically, it's really interesting. But I think the biggest thing that fascinates and rewards me about this work is not just helping people sleep better, but developing resilient sleep. And this is where the sleep anxiety piece fits in, because a lot of long-term self-perpetuating sleeping issues are generated from the anxiety about not sleeping itself.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a fascinating subject.
Absolutely. And I'd like everyone's feedback on this as well, wherever you're tuning in from. So if you experience any sleep anxiety, whether it's insomnia, whether it's addiction, could actually impact it, can't it?
Absolutely. Not only directly, but substance withdrawal can create sleeping issues organically. And then what happens, and this happens with the development of insomnia in general, is that usually there's some sort of some sort of trigger that triggers off kind of a short-term sleeping issue, which is normal stress response. But then when the person begins worrying about the not sleeping itself, that begins to feed on itself, becomes a bit of a vicious circle. Because we evolved in such a way that we shouldn't be able to sleep if we're under threat, or if we're being chased by the proverbial tiger. But when we start feeling under threat because we're not sleeping, we're afraid of the not sleeping itself, then our sleep gets worse, and then we get more worried, and then our sleep gets worse, and we get more worried, and around we go. But when it comes to addiction and substance withdrawal in particular, it could be anything from people who smoke all day, wake up in the night with cravings. Same thing with alcohol or substances being used in the day. And not only is there that organic element, there can then be that more psychobiological element of the fear of not sleeping that keeps that going. And that can go on long after the withdrawal issue has resolved.
Wow. How big is the issue of it, that of insomnia, of struggle to sleep, and do you think, we also had before the show started, how do you think the problem's getting worse?
Well, if you're looking at incidents, most people are going to have some shorter term insomnia at some point in their life, because we all get thrown things, and that's more of a reactive kind of insomnia. The 20-25%, depends on what studies you look at, may have a longer term sleeping issue like insomnia at one time, kind of at least in the Western world. It's a little bit different in other places. But I do think it's getting worse for a few reasons, I think. We spoke briefly before the show started about the pandemic, and not only anxiety around the unknown and everything that was going on, but people's schedules and rhythms and routines got thrown out. People no longer had to get up in the morning and get fully dressed and go out to work. Everybody was at home and they were dressed from here up. And their morning rhythms got shifted, their evening rhythms, people can just work indefinitely into the evening. There's no natural contextual changes that help compartmentalize life. And I also think that there's an assumption that we should be able to control our sleep because we've got these gadgets that we can measure our sleep with. And so when we don't sleep well, we really worry and we kind of go into control mode and data collection mode. And sleep is a lot like this is the analogy, sleep is a lot like love. If you try to force it to happen, it's just going to get messy. It's bound to backfire. And it's different than anything else because, at least, in the Western world, we're raised, if you work really hard and you want something really badly and you try really hard, then you're more likely to achieve your outcome. But the exact opposite happens with sleep. So, the more tech we have, the more ability to monitor, the more worried we get about our sleep because we think we should be able to control it. And I think also, and this gets more complicated. We might not get into this, but people want everything to be very comfortable. Right. And doing some of the stuff that recovering from insomnia requires can be uncomfortable. So people get stuck on this hamster wheel of quick fixes and teas and potions and herbs and things that work for a few days, and then they stop working where they may not have worked in the first place. Or they get very obsessed with sleep hygiene, like making sure the room is really dark. Sure. And there's a big difference between, having a room that's dark, for example, that can help light from intruding and waking you up. But if you're taping your blinds to the wall to keep the light out, it's the fear that's keeping you awake, not the light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely. So, give a little bit of an insight for people that don't know or they're just starting up with it. What is insomnia? Yeah,
that it's actually quite a loaded question because there's a camp of us who look at insomnia disorder and we go, is it really? I mean, technically, medically, it's a diagnosis with a big number after the end of it, and GPs can write it down as their diagnostic classifications. But it's really what kind of insomnia that affects most people in the long run, absent a biological problem, absent a withdrawal, absent those things, is psychobiological in nature, and it's fed by the anxiety. So a lot of us are looking at insomnia itself as almost a manifestation of a very specific anxiety or very specific kind of phobia of not sleeping. And if you want to look at the kind of the criteria, a person who has difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, waking up early, 3 or more nights a week for more than 3 months would kind of be hit the criteria. Yeah. But there are a lot of different sleep disorders. So difficulty sleeping could be it could just be stress, or the fact that you have 3 jobs, or you live in poverty and there's a lot going on. There's all sorts of reasons why people don't sleep. In terms of sleep disorders, there's over 80 of them. And insomnia, again, insomnia is different than a lot of the other sleep disorders. The other sleep disorders are characterized by like what we call like pathological sleepiness during the day. But especially the really common ones like sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome, periodic limb movement disorder, they're people falling asleep all day long. People with insomnia are tired and wired, and they can't sleep even in the daytime, usually. You hear it it's really common. People have this hyper arousal and this hyper vigilance because of the fear. And so taking naps is difficult. So they have difficulty sleeping at night and also in the daytime. And that's a big difference between all the other sleep disorders and insomnia.
And with people who struggle to sleep, and like you say, there's a whole range of levels and types of things that can affect that. It can affect obviously your mental health. We know sleep deprivation is one of the oldest forms of, I think, torture. It can drastically affect your mental health, but also your physical health in many ways. When the people you speak to, would you find them more concerned about one or the other, or is it an overall awareness that they need to, confront their problem, sleep?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, because the people who are reading the public health messaging around sleep, the public health messaging around sleep says, you should prioritize your sleep, which, yes, sleep is important. It's important for us to be at our physical and mental best. The people who aren't prioritizing their sleep aren't listening to those messages. And, it's the people who can't sleep, even if they wanted to, who are doom scrolling on, whatever platform in the middle of the night, looking for the fix for their not sleeping. But I think people are very concerned about the potential physical consequences of not sleeping well. I think obviously the mental health consequences tend to play out in the short term and are more obvious for people. But because of the messaging, people are thinking longer term. And it's because a lot of these messages get turned into sound bites, there's a lot that's missing. There's a lot that's missing in that. For example, cardiovascular risk. The biggest cardiovascular risk when it comes to association, and it's not cause, it's association between sleeping issues and cardiovascular risk, is not insomnia, it's sleep apnea. But the person not sleeping sees sleep difficulties and then this whole list of things that could go wrong, and they begin to then be more afraid and put more pressure on themselves to sleep well, which then worsens their sleep too. So it's a real catch-22. A lot of people want me to come in and speak to their companies, for example, and talk about all of the risks of not sleeping well. I'm like, that's not necessarily the most helpful message to focus on, because the people who can't sleep are going to go home and sleep worse, right?
Yeah, I've not heard of that, because the companies addressing it or finding it initially. That's interesting. I've got another question I've written down. So there's with sleep, I know where there's different levels, the light sleep and then the deeper sleep, the alpha waves and beta waves. And is it true that it's better to have, say, less sleep but a deeper sleep, so 4 hours, 5 hours of deep sleep, than sort of 8 hours where you're only really lightly sleeping and sort of drifting in and out and not really getting that deep level of sleep? Is the quality of sleep better than quantity?
Wonderful question. I just thought of about 10 things to say all at once because there were
Give us them all.
lots of pieces in that.
Definitely.
So when we're looking at healthy human sleep, we spend most of the night in lighter sleep anyway, stage 1, stage 2, deeper sleep, stage 3, and then dreaming sleep, stage 4. Well, REM sleep. So REM sleep. There's non-REM, which is like a bunch of stages, and then there's REM sleep. So if you asked a group of people what makes them feel better during the day, 6 hours of really deep sleep or 8 or 9 hours of tossing and turning and feeling, frustrated and light, fluffy sleep, the people who get the perceived deeper sleep are going to feel better because they probably are spending more time in those deeper stages of sleep. Stage 3 in particular is very rejuvenating. And people who sleep in very light sleep for more than they should, technically, percentage wise, those people will feel worse because they haven't hit those more restorative hours of sleep. In terms of how many hours a person needs, this is another kind of hornet's nest in sleep messaging. There's this myth that everybody needs to get 8 hours of sleep. There's various stories about how that number kind of came about, but the bottom line, there is a percentage of the population, very tiny percentage, who would be considered short sleepers, and their healthy sleep would be quite low levels of sleep compared to the average person. The amount of sleep that I tell somebody is good for them and you figure it out yourself. How long does it take you to fall asleep? If you fall asleep in more than 5 minutes, but generally under 20 minutes, some people a little bit more, you wake a couple of times in the night at the most, and just long enough to remember it, and then you fall back to sleep. We actually wake up many, many, many times at night. We just don't always remember it. That's part of our safety system. That's our own vigilance built into our sleep. You fall back to sleep, and when you wake up the next day, and once you get moving for the day, you have enough energy and focus to be able to do what you want to do. And for some people, that's 7 hours. If you looked at all the people who are satisfied with their sleep, tends to be 7 to 7.25 hours is the kind of the mode there. I'm a 9-hour person, so it varies quite a lot. If people are getting over 10, we start to say, is there something else going on here? Because there are sleep issues called hypersomnias where people sleep too much.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. The really interesting about that touches back onto the kind of the control element with tracking sleep is that these gadgets are not great with sleep staging, but people get very, very obsessed with the graphs and things and their scores and the things that it tells us. So I tend to tell people, if you're having any issues with your sleep, don't use these to monitor your sleep. They're not as accurate as they could be. And it's also unhelpful to hyper focus on the numbers. There's a perception that I should be sleeping deeply all night. And why is my percentage only 25%? That would be considered normal, to have 25% of the night being in deep sleep. And it also changes over the lifespan too. That 25% number is probably for somebody in their 20s and early 30s, maybe. By the time we're 80, it's considered quite normal maybe to have almost no slow wave sleep and deep sleep.
I've got 3 questions.
Go for it.
One, well, obviously Kerry's actually put on TikTok, what's the best thing to do before bed to help us sleep?
Ask a person who has no sleeping issues at all and never has had what they do to help themselves sleep at night. Their answer will be, I don't do anything. But if I had to give kind of just some general advice, I am not a fan of strict routines and rigid rules because they set up a situation, again, where we're trying to control sleep. And if we're doing things only to try to make ourselves sleep, we're reinforcing to that fear in us that not sleeping is dangerous, and that can feed a sleeping problem. The most important thing to do kind of in a wind down, as people are kind of preparing, they've kind of closed the work day off, and then there's maybe the family time or the personal time, and then there's that time right before bed, is do something that you enjoy doing. Don't do something specifically to make yourself sleep, because this sends that behavior sends the wrong message to the brain. And that message is, if I don't sleep, it's really, really bad. It's really dangerous. And we don't want to feed that idea. And it's also, I think, good to have some variety in what we do before we go to bed. There's a focus on the routines, and those can become a trap for some people, particularly people who are anxious or perfectionistic, who happen to also be people who are most predisposed to developing insomnia in the first place.
Wow. Yeah, that's helpful, by the way.
Just briefly turn down his head. So that's about routines to do. What about things to avoid? I mean, obviously, apart from the obvious caffeine, maybe alcohol, what about, like, for example, phones, blue light,
blue light syndrome.
Exactly, blue light syndrome, and talking message if you go to bed. Is that something? Is there anything you should avoid? Like phones, our phone. Using phones to go to bed.
So it would depend on who I'm speaking to. If I'm speaking to a person who doesn't have any sleeping issues, it's very fluid. Most of my clients have much better sleep hygiene than I do. I look at my phone before I go to bed. I don't have any sleeping issues. It's not that in and of itself that is necessarily an issue. Content. Now, I'm very mindful of the content that I consume online at night. I'm very interested in, for example, politics back home. I can tell you, in the run up to an election, I'm not going to be looking at the news before I go to bed because it's just going to wind me up. The content, I would say, if your people are scrolling, the content is much more important than the amount of light. Yes, lots and lots of very bright light, doesn't necessarily have to be only blue light, can reduce melatonin production, but that does bounce back. It's going to delay that onset of that melatonin, might make it more difficult to fall asleep. But I think that ends up getting over-egged, and they sometimes say, well, for 3 hours, I shouldn't have any screens on, and I should have all the lights in my house turned off because otherwise I'm not going to be able to sleep. And that's taking it too far, I think.
Okay, great.
Absolutely.
Are there any more questions, Adam, on?
Yes. Second one, what is the difference? And I feel like this is a good one here. And Robert, I'll get to yours in a minute, your comments, because they're brilliant. What's the difference between sleeping when you've got so much trauma in your head, which obviously can be connected to the anxiety, or someone that is addicted to like caffeine or alcohol misuse, whatever?
So the question is, how does the sleep differ?
Yeah, between them. Like, what's the difference? What's the difference when it comes to going to sleep?
Yep.
What's the difference between someone that has got addiction to like alcohol or drugs or caffeine or whatever, compared to someone that's going through severe trauma?
Yeah, well, the person who's experiencing the trauma-related types of feelings, the hypervigilance is going to be the thing that's going to make sleep difficult. Yeah. Whereas if you have a few drinks before bed or earlier in the day, and then you go to bed and then you're laying there and your heart's racing and you can't sleep, that's more organic and doesn't necessarily tie in with hypervigilance. Now, you could expand that out a million ways, 6 ways to Sunday, and say, well, somebody is having all this stuff going on in their life, and that's why they are, experiencing addiction, or they're drinking before bed, or that sort of thing. But I would say that would be the primary difference in a really super simplified way between those two groups of people.
Wow.
Interesting.
Wow. Yeah.
I love these questions. These are so good because there's like a million threads you could pull off of each of them.
Yeah. Right. With your question to you then, how did you figure out that you at one point had a sleep problem, and how did you break that cycle?
Right. So there's 2 strands to that. So the first time I had a kind of what I considered a more persistent sleeping issue was after the death of my first husband. He had cancer, he passed away, and naturally I'm going to have sleeping issues, right? But they went on for a very long time. And I remember a switch flipped in my head where I was like, something's wrong with my sleep. My sleep is broken. And then everything really went badly. So it went downhill from there. And I came out of that particular episode, and I didn't know exactly how. until I'd gone through my second one later on in like my mid-30s. And that is where I became introduced to these concepts of how we think about sleep and sleeplessness, and how we feel about sleep and sleeplessness. We do have some ability to manage that and to think differently about that. And that can directly affect our psychological arousal levels. And that can affect how we respond to not sleeping, which can make us more or less likely to sleep better or worse. For example, somebody who has difficulty falling asleep is not asleep at 1 o'clock. They went to bed at 10, and they're working themselves into a state physically and emotionally and mentally, and worrying about the next day and what's going to happen. And, should I take something? Should I not? And etc. But 3 weeks ago, that person may have been out at a party and was up until 3 and everything was fine. So the sleeplessness itself was more neutral. The overlay on it created a scenario where a person was either going to be more likely to fall asleep easily or less likely to. And the key to long-term sleep resilience is to learn to ride those waves and to not respond to them with a state of panic. So when I learned that, I stopped responding to my sleeplessness in the same way that I used to. So a lot of people will say, well, I want to go back to the way I was. And they're talking strictly about like getting 8 hours. What they don't want to do is to return to the way they were thinking about their sleep. When I began to feel more neutral about not sleeping, I began to sleep better. Yeah. So I kind of came full circle, and I did my own training, professionally in sleep, and kind of went from there. But one of the other things in terms of responding to sleeplessness, a lot of people cut stuff out of their life because they're afraid that they're not going to show up 100%, or it's going to be really difficult. And yes, it is. But if we imagine that life is like this, like rectangle here, and we all have lots of different elements in the rectangle. We have work and family and friends and hobbies and all this other stuff in here. If we start cutting out chunks of those because we're not feeling like we're up to it, or whatever the reason is, what's left? We got the sleep issue is one of those things too, and it's just going to expand and fill the space. It's like putting it under a magnifying glass. It makes it big, 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 and
that's when you become
more
isolated.
Exactly. Yeah. When I realized how I got through the first episode is when I started reintroducing stuff back into my life and engaging in all those other things, even though I felt terrible. Even though I felt terrible, because I ended up doing kind of accidentally was proving to myself that I can do it even if I'm tired.
So, Tracy, I've got an interesting to pick up on. So you seem to say that a lot of people, it's natural rhythms of sleep, sleeping well, being up for different reasons. And a lot of people perhaps worry about it too much, and then worrying about not sleeping causes more problems. Yeah. So it's one of the things that you work with your client. One of the things you say to your clients, or you help your clients with, is not over worrying about not sleeping. Is that one of the things you incorporate into your coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big focus of it. We look at structural types of things. So, for example, a common advice is, if you're not sleeping well, go to bed early and try to get some more sleep. This is called time. Ends up being called time in bed extension, where people are spending a lot more time in bed awake than they are asleep. And you can actually artificially create insomnia in a completely healthy sleeper by doing this. So that tends to go wrong. People are doing it to catch an extra minute because they're afraid of not sleeping. Then we look at the way people think and feel about not sleeping. And it sounds really easy to say, well, just don't worry about it. Don't be afraid of not sleeping. But how do you operationalize that? That's where the work really is. Yeah. Okay. So we spend, I would say, majority of the
problem with me. Then there's clearly a problem with me then, because I'm one of these that if I'm just lying in bed, I'm completely shattered, exhausted, ready to go to sleep. But as soon as my head hits that pillow, I'm awake. I really am. But I'm a light sleeper, really light sleeper. And this is what I've been told, because I ain't got a clue. When I've got a lot of my mind, I tend to sleepwalk.
Mm-hmm.
I do
Yeah.
that. Okay. But then when I'm
I know
asleep,
some people that do that too. Yeah. It's
like
a stress response.
What's that? Sorry.
Yeah, I look at that in the two people that pop to my mind is that's kind of a stress response, kind of we can kind of like shut it out a little bit more.
Right, I'll give a prime example of what I actually do in my sleep, and this is what I've been told. There's been times when I've come downstairs and I've unlocked the front door and I've just went back to bed. Wow, another one is I've came downstairs, I've turned the cooker on, the gas on, put the frying pan on it, then just went back to bed.
Yeah. Parasomnias are a group of sleep disorders that behave in that way.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And then another one is I intend to kick in my sleep. Like, obviously, the sheet is perfectly on, but then when I wake up, the sheet's off. I don't, and then the cushions are all destroyed and all.
Yeah, there could be there could be some. I mean, if it becomes concerning and dangerous kind of behavior, like turning the gas cooker on in the middle of the night, you could always speak to your doctor about that because there are treatments for parasomnias, and there's a disorder called REM behavior disorder, where people act out their dreams. They don't experience or they don't consistently experience the paralysis that accompanies a REM sleep because our muscles become paralyzed so that we don't act out our dreams. So people will actively act out their dreams and like punch their pillow. That can create risks for other people as well. This is what I mean. It's like sleep is fascinating. But that phenomenon that you mentioned, you might be really tired and really sleepy, and then your head hits the pillow and your brain goes.
I'm awake, yeah.
That's called conditioned arousal, and not necessarily in your case, but in a lot of people's cases. And that can be created by spending a lot of time laying in bed worrying and being frustrated and being upset. Because before people have sleeping issues, they're like bed sleep, bed sleep, bed sleep. They don't even think about it. I mean, they might think, yeah, I like my sheets or I paid too much for my mattress or whatever. But they take the sleepy feelings to bed and then they sleep. But when people spend more and more time awake, especially if they're having lots of anxious feelings, the bed then kind of becomes a place, well, sometimes I sleep here and sometimes I struggle to make sleep happen. And sometimes I worry about my job or my pets so that you can actually train yourself to wake up when you're in bed. That can be reverse engineered through behavioral types of approaches, but that's really, really
I need to get assessed.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get assessed, Kerry.
Tracy, so I suffer from restless leg syndrome, and I've had it for like 20 years, and it comes and goes. I've had a lot of tests, but can't find the reason. But so what I used to lie in bed when I have it, and then not be able to sleep, and my bed would become. It would become this thing where I associated with not being asleep. So rather than a place of comfort, it was. So I've decided, so I've now sort of addressed it by basically when I can't sleep, when I have a restless leg, get out of my bed and try and do work, try and turn the positive thing. If I realize I'm just not going to sleep,
do something else.
Do something else. Get out. Try and perhaps either watch some TV or do some work, get something done. Because I know I'm not going to be able to sleep. And then, so at least I'm out of the bed, and otherwise, I think what happens is, like you said, the bed is becoming this thing of association of stress because I can't sleep in it. So.
Yeah, it's called bed dread. I mean, some people end up dreading going to bed because that's where the battleground is. The slippery slope to that is, but I don't feel any pressure to sleep if I'm sitting on the sofa. And then people begin to sleep on the sofa, which is fine if that's going to work for you forever. But the issue becomes, and I always get flack when I say that because people are like, well, I'll take it where I can get it. And don't tell me I can't sleep on the, I'm not. I'm just saying there are consequences.
Sure. Yeah.
Because then if you have no pressure and you begin to associate the sofa with sleep, if you ever want to go back and sleep in your bed, you've got two issues. You've got the conditioned arousal associated with the bed and the bed dread. But oh my gosh, now I know I can sleep if I just go on the sofa. It becomes doubly complicated.
There has been times when our daughter was first born, obviously I was in bed and I couldn't sleep at all. And obviously my daughter kept waking up as well during the night. So I thought, right, okay. So I just got her and came onto the sofa, and my partner then woke me up thinking, where's my daughter? Where's Adam? And found that I was on the sofa and she was asleep next to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wherever we feel less pressure to sleep is the place we're likely to sleep. So, you know, when people are frustrated, they get up out of bed and they go sit on the sofa and they resign themselves to not sleeping, they're more likely to fall asleep.
I think
but you can do that. You can do that in bed. You just have to teach yourself how to do it.
See, I've done both. I've slept in the bed and slept on the sofa. I admit the bed can be comfy when I'm not using it as a battleground, but the sofa can be comfy as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if it doesn't create problems for you, that's fine. It's when it becomes habitual. If you ever want to go back to sleep in your bed, that can create issues.
Yeah,
but I always get in trouble for talking about the sofa thing.
The popular second toilet, second backup bed. So I'll just a quick question about it. So Tracy, I mean, obviously, you know, there's such a wide spectrum here of obviously conditions and when it's a problem. You know, part of it is perhaps when is it a problem not being cells with sleep. So when is it a problem? You know, when do people need to see a doctor or sleep coach? Because like you say, some people have very little sleep, it's fine. Some people, you know, it's such a long spectrum of things. When would you say we're actually they told to see a doctor or a coach?
So if somebody is experiencing what we would call excessive daytime sleepiness, like even if they are getting 8 hours at night, if there's a screening tool that's used, if they are literally falling asleep, having to put their head down, driving in a passenger in a car, and they're not, if they're quote unquote sleeping all night and they're that sleepy during the day, that is a trip to the GP, not to a sleep coach.
Okay.
If they are not sleeping well and they are wired for sound, and that kind of vibrating kind of feeling, person who's qualified as a sleep therapist should be able to screen that. If in doubt, always get a GP referral. Speak to the doctor, because there are so few sleep therapists. Doctors prescribe a lot of sleeping medications. For better or for worse, I'm not a prescriber. I can't say don't do that. But what I can say is that the first line recommendations, according to all of the major medical associations and all the major sleep associations around the world, is that cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is should be the first line intervention if it's available for longstanding insomnia. And I don't even think you should wait till it's longstanding. Why wait until all of this stuff has gotten ingrained? The criteria is 3 months, but if somebody says, I've been having this issue for a month, I'm not going to say no to helping them, because I don't want to see them go further down the rabbit hole. Conversely, people have come to me and said, I haven't had difficulty sleeping all week. And I said, you got to put this out of your mind. Because if it's difficulty sleeping for 1 week, that would be considered quite normal, especially given the circumstances that person would describe. Because we don't want to, again, put it under the magnifying glass and feed it with our attention.
Yeah, I think I need to get one of these where I'm literally being assessed to what the hell I do in my sleep.
Yes. If you're having those sorts of behaviors in your sleep, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I don't.
They are treatable. And restless leg is treatable as well. There's a wonderful article, I think.
Really?
It's a Mayo Clinic article that discusses, and again, not medical advice. I'm not a prescriber. Talks about ferritin levels and how even people with normal ferritin levels can sometimes benefit from increased ferritin, but it's not something you want to supplement.
Ferritin is in iron. Ferritin, the iron supplement. The iron.
Ferritin's a transporter protein, so people can have enough iron and they can have inadequate levels of ferritin, and it starts getting a bit beyond me because not a doctor, but it's not something that people shouldn't just go out willy-nilly and supplement with iron, because that can create lots of other issues for people.
No, definitely.
But it's one of those things where that is a perfect example of something that is not necessarily a tired and wired insomnia type of picture, and that's a GP referral.
Sure. Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yeah, I need to check something out.
Okay, a little free coaching.
I may disappear for a few weeks.
Yeah.
No, she actually did put the comment, if you find the settee better for sleep, bye.
Sorry, what was the
she put, if you find the settee better for sleep, bye.
She's awesome.
Yeah, there's, I don't judge what people do. We all do what we need to do in the short term. It's just that all of these things have consequences if we repeat them and repeat them and repeat them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing about again, like, when should you see your doctor? I think it's a good idea to see the doctor anytime you have difficulty with sleeping that lasts for more than a few weeks. Not necessarily to get medication, but to make sure also that it's not like a thyroid problem or an iron problem, or it could be a host of other things. And we don't ever want to miss something like that and say, oh yeah, it's insomnia. Because some of the approaches for insomnia, although they're very helpful for insomnia, are downright not helpful or could be risky for people who have untreated sleep apnea, for example. So it's always a good idea.
Yeah. Best safe than sorry, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I refer people all the time.
Please refer me.
You need an overnight sleep study, maybe, Adam? You ask your doctor.
I do.
They're hard to come by. It's resource intensive. But something like that wouldn't be picked up on a home sleep study thing where they put the thing on
you have to go
they're looking for sleep apnea with that particular one.
You have to go elsewhere. Like, no, I ain't got a clue.
Or a sleep physician who knows all the ins and outs, because there's like I said, there's lots and lots of different disorders, would be like, oh yeah, that's what that is, and this is how we treat it, and you might not even need one.
Yeah, people may get worried what they see on me.
Well, it's fascinating subject. Fascinating.
It really is. It really is. A lot of people who have insomnia, and I talk about insomnia a lot because that's my specialism, they feel quite isolated because the word insomnia gets overused. You might say, if you confide in a coworker and you say, I've got really bad insomnia, and somebody says, yeah, I had a really rough night last night too. It's not the same thing. So it's quite misunderstood by people who haven't experienced it.
I think it's also one of those things where it can affect, obviously, if you're with a partner or family, or even if you're perhaps renting, if you're up all night, if you're perhaps the living room watching TV, it can obviously have a knock-on effect. It's something that people will be aware of, and quite, if you're walking about or you can't sleep, there's that aspect, but it does affect other people.
And it always seems like early birds and night owls end up together.
Yeah, overlap.
So the early bird wants to go to bed and the night owl is just getting going, and then the early bird's awake, and the night owl is trying to get sleep while you're kind of going about your business in the morning and early afternoon.
Sure.
Well, that's curious. That is because I'm not an early bird. My partner's not an early bird, but I'm the night owl, but she's not. She goes to bed early.
Okay.
Everybody's different. Everybody's different.
It's actually interesting because that's an interesting point. Because I thought before the show, I thought there was like I also only believed the 8 hours. Everyone should have 8 hours. Most people do, but some people don't. But it's actually finding out that it's not. It's so many shades of grey. It's not. Sleep is not prescriptive and
it's like with any population level kind of thing, there's a bell curve, right, and even within that, the quote unquote, I hate the word normal, but within the norm, there's a bell curve in there. I'm an early bird. I do sleep more and a little bit later in the winter, and my teenager is definitely a night owl. And some people remain night owls. And that particular circadian variation, as long as there isn't any complication, actually, I object to it being considered kind of like a circadian rhythm disorder, because the only reason it's a disorder is because society is structured around the people in the middle of the bell curve who have like 9 to 5 jobs, sure. And it's a little bit difficult to do that if you're an early bird. It's extremely difficult to do that if you're a night owl, to get up and be someplace for 9 o'clock in the morning. But this is where it gets a little bit. There are other circadian rhythm disorders that are very significant, but I think this one's labeled a disorder because it doesn't fit within the social framework that most of society is set up with.
It's interesting about the effect on light, because however much sleep I've had or not had, if I wake up and it's pitch black outside, winter or a bit earlier, I struggle to get up. But if I'm not having much sleep, but it's light outside and the birds are singing, it's perhaps it's summer, then it's much easier. And I think there's something psychological about waking up to light and seeing it's light, and it thinking, right, it's daytime, I get up. I think it's an interesting
absolutely thing. I find the same thing. And actually, when we're talking about light and dark, this is sometimes interesting. It's not reflected now because it's night here and I've got an artificial light on, but I'm standing in front of a large window in the bedroom with the blind up, and this blind never goes down. So in the summertime, I'm waking up and it's light and I am ready to go. In the middle of winter, I wake up and it is harder to get moving.
Yeah, interesting.
I have more sleep inertia in the winter, and I sleep more in the winter.
What do I do then? Because if I'm like asleep, there has been times when I've fell asleep about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't wake up until about 7 in the morning. And there's been times when my partner's got up, and even though my eyes are not even open, she turns the light on and it wakes me up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of these.
So are you asking for like relationship advice? Or
yes. Do I do something?
Definitely not an expert. Definitely not an expert. You can, if you can't work it out, eye mask might be your friend.
Eye mask. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, never heard about that.
Yeah, that would be my
simple solution. Yeah, sometimes some of the simple ones are the best ones, don't they?
Yes. Oh, I don't know, but either way, no. But I'm like you in the summer, because where my bedroom is, it's literally facing the hallway on top of the steps, and there's this big window. Like there's no curtains on it, there's no blinds on it, whatever. And in summer, the sun literally beams right through the window straight into our eyes.
So nice.
Totally.
See, I love that, and it goes back to people who wake up early in the morning and they don't want to, hate 5 o'clock in the morning because they're like, it's 2 hours before I want to get up. 5 o'clock is like, it's a terrible, terrible time. Whereas for me, I'm like, I love it.
Yeah. 2 hours.
So it's like how we view time and sleep and sleeplessness has a huge impact on how we start our day.
Yeah.
Right. And if we can start to reframe that and create some shifts in that so that we don't have to like it, but so we're not adding extra weight onto it, that can help us in our daytime. And also
everyone's telling me to get an eye mask, so maybe I need to look into that.
Add that to your
they're cheap.
Yeah. Well,
they're readily available.
Yeah, well, it's my birthday next week. So obviously Kerry said that she was going to get me one for my birthday.
There you go. Got my hints now.
But then Robert's saying, get a custom printed eye mask that looks like my face with my eyes
Sounds
open.
like Robert probably sells custom printed eye masks.
All right, yeah, so it looks like I'm getting an eye mask, guys.
Yes, interesting about Tracy, because I think I've heard that, the first hour you get up is like the goal now. It sets your day, your pace for your day. If you wake up feeling positive in that first hour, then you're more likely to have a positive day. If you wake up feeling refreshed or compared to tired, I think that first hour is what will set how well the rest of the day will go. It's such a key thing, isn't it? How do we wake up? How do we feel? What do we do in that first hour?
Absolutely. And that comes back to, I think, circling back around to the beginning, everybody wants everything to be like really comfortable and easy. And sometimes it's just not going to be. Now we can make that worse, or we can find ways to make it a little bit better. So, not getting enough sleep and you wake up and I've had, the sandpaper eyes and all the other stuff that happens. Okay. If we're going to put our feet on the floor and we're going to be we're going to like feed the anger about it, or we're going to have a worse day. And the sleep cycle, physically and mentally, when it comes to kind of creating boundaries and rhythms through the day, starts when we wake up in the morning. So even if we've had a difficult night, how can we set ourselves up to start our day looking at something that's not behind us that we can't control and can't change?
And that's what I say to my partner all the time, because I'm this type of person that I'm a positive person. I really am. But when I come downstairs with my son, 7-month-old son, the last thing I want to see is the news on telly, because it's so depressing. But she has it on.
One of the best. We never watched the news anyway, but one of the best things I ever did was take my email off my phone, because I have stubby fingers. I'm never going to answer an email on the phone anyway. But waking up in the morning and starting to then look through all the things where people want some of my energy before I've had a chance to give myself any energy. I now have a completely different approach to the morning. I get up, I've got quiet time. I don't get on the phone when I take the shower or work out or whatever. And I listen to kind of a motivational app that I really, really like. And it really sets me up for the day.
I agree. I think we've got to be selfish with our time to an extent, because time's precious and
absolutely. And it comes down to boundaries, right? Am I going to carve out time for myself to look after me, or am I constantly going to be giving out energy to everybody else? Because there's plenty of people in the world who want something from everybody. And we have to have these kind of boundaries. I think particularly in the online world, expectations are high for immediate responses and and that sort of that makes it more complicated.
No, time. I think things demanding our time, especially if I think it's online, social media, but also distracting us as well. We're bombarded with. There's a phrase I heard, which is we don't fear the weapons of mass destruction; it's weapons of mass distraction we fear now, because we're bombarded with things trying to take our time and distract us, and
I think that aside from the pure content element of scrolling on social media, the other thing that it does that I think is unhelpful is that it's teaching us, well, we're all well trained now. It has taught us judge. Is it worthy? No. Judge, without allowing any space for reflection. And then we do that to ourselves too. That makes that worse, I think. It's a minefield. It's a minefield. And I think especially with young people, I try to tell my teenagers about the time where we didn't even, the phone was a thing that was on the wall and it had a really long curly cord. And if you wanted privacy, you just have to stretch it as far as it would go.
I remember those days too.
And the life before the internet, where we actually had to entertain ourselves and go find things to do, just very different world now. They don't ever have to turn it off. They have it with them all the time. They don't ever turn it off, and that's what they're used to.
No, my youngest son, my son is 8. He doesn't believe that world existed. When I explain about black and white TVs, phones, the wall, he just like can't comprehend it. He's laughing. I once asked I asked a young gent, he was probably 16. It was a sporting event and he was there watching somebody, and he was wearing a t-shirt called a mixtape, and it's the name of a team. And I said, "Do you know what a mixtape is?"
And he was thinking about it, and he really couldn't get it. He was sort of like Spotify.
Yeah,
And like the pain of making a mixtape. So we were trying to explain how you would do it, and he was like, "Oh, he's so old."
Yeah, so easy nowadays.
And that's why I keep saying kids today just don't know how to be kids. Because if you put a cassette player or videotape or whatever in front of a kid, they won't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it's like, why would you have a cassette tape and a pencil?
And then speaking about stress levels, kids today, like obviously with us, when we had a videotape, and if we wanted to watch a film and we got to the end, we had to literally rewind it all the way back to watch it again. Yeah. Today, you don't have to.
Or trying to record something off the radio.
Yeah.
That's stress.
Yeah. Whoever thought that video rental places would go bust?
Yeah, no.
I just remember, going and you grab the box and just you hope that they have one.
Yeah, God. That's it.
Yeah. But I think the pace of life is definitely different.
Yeah.
You used to make plans, you'd plan your day and you'd go out and you couldn't just text and change and chop and change. And the flow of life is just a lot different. And I think it's more stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Final question, and then we'll wrap up. Where can people find you?
Well, if you put Tracy the Sleep Coach into your favorite search engine, you'll find all the bits. But you'll find me on TikTok, Tracy the Sleep Coach. You find me on YouTube, Tracy the Sleep Coach. Instagram is where I tend to be most because I can chat there in a way that I can't really chat with people on TikTok very easily. It's Tracy the Sleep Coach. And I have a Facebook group called Sound Sleep Strategies on Facebook.
Please invite me. Please invite me.
Yeah. And my website is tracythesleepcoach.co.uk. And I have lots of free resources and things available on the website. My services are all on the website. People who might be interested in working with me can book a free 20-minute chat to see if we're a good match. I'm trying to be everywhere.
I don't think I need 20 minutes. Spent this 57 minutes to just answer my question.
I'll be in touch, Tracy.
Of course.
I hope to see my TikTok following explode now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So obviously I am going to remain on TikTok for a little bit more, but I think that'll be it. Next week we are at 8 p.m. Nick, if you're on next week, where I can't remember who we've got, but we're discussing, and this is for women, we're actually discussing perinatal mental health.
Oh, wonderful. That's fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah, hi Mike. Yeah, I ain't got a clue about it. I don't know nothing.
There'll be lots of questions then, and questions are good.
Questions, exactly. That's.
Please tune in.
Yeah.
Or if you want to come and join us, you're more than welcome to.
Come back, Tracy.
Yeah, come back
I might pop back if you have me back. We can talk some more about sleep.
Yeah. You're more than welcome to come back on. Absolutely. Yeah, but it'll be literally this time next week.
8 o'clock next week.
So not an hour before, this time now.
Right. I appreciate accommodating my early bird tendencies with shifting to 7. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Obviously, Nick said he preferred 8 p.m. But I'm like, oh, what do I do?
Oh, no.
It's all good now.
It's all my fault.
I'm all right, Mike. How are you?
That's so happy, isn't it?
So we're seeing you next week then.
Yes, see me. What about you, Tracy?
Me? 8 o'clock? Ooh, yeah, I don't know. I probably can't get away with doing more than one at a time.
Oh, we'll see.
We'll see.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, and I will see you over on TikTok, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Nice to meet you, Nick.
Yes, lovely.
Red
Tracy. Great chat.
It's Red Nose Day next Friday.
All right. Red Nose.
Oh.
So we may turn.
We gotta wear one.
We have to wear one now. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I probably won't need to wear one. I'll probably just be given one, but it's all right.
Okay, I'll do it.
Steal one from the children.
Yeah, that's so you can steal one children. Like I know skis.
Yeah. All right.
Fantastic.
See you later.
Nice chatting. Bye.
Okay. All right.